Today we want to talk about the topic of what I've called men and mistakes, and that is the type of men to avoid getting involved with. And the first individual that I'd like to talk about to avoid is the man who has already abandoned his family. And this happens quite a bit in our society. And I think the temptation is for a lot of people is that when they fall in love with someone who's already abandoned his family, that somehow they think their love is unique and even unparalleled in the universe. And somehow that makes it right. And yet something that you need to remember, and this would be the same thing for a woman who has abandoned her husband and family, is if his or her mother or sisters or former wife could not make him responsible, you won't be able to do that either. You cannot make a man more faithful than he's proven himself to be already. Don't buy into the myth that, well, maybe the former people in his life, his former wife didn't love him enough or didn't treat him well enough. No, she probably treated him just as well as she could. And you're not going to be able to treat him any better. And so it's good to be honest. It's good to be clear about things like that. The problem with people that fall into these types of relationships is that they think they're in a special case. Yeah, they might say to themselves, well, I know this isn't right, but it's destiny. Or no one ever loved like this, you might think. No one ever found themselves in a situation like this before. What I've heard from a number of people is, how can it be wrong? How can it be wrong if it feels so right? Well, how long is it going to feel right? First of all, in Proverbs chapter 16, Proverbs 16 verse 25, there is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Just because it feels right at this very moment doesn't mean it's right. And usually what people mean by feeling right is that it feels good. Feeling good and feeling right are not the same thing. The amount of second marriages that end in divorce is far greater than first marriages that end in divorce, and that just proves to all of us that a number of relationships that people justified because it felt right, obviously it wasn't right, because a lot of those relationships end up falling apart. In the book of Malachi, there's something else that we think about. A lot of times when people fall in love that don't have a right to be together, especially when one already has a spouse, the thing that they forget about is, how does this feel to the spouse that is left? In the book of Malachi chapter 2 and in verse 14, yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been a witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant. During the time of Malachi, there were a number of Jewish men that were leaving their Jewish wives for somebody else. Earlier in the book of Malachi, we have in verse 13, and this is another thing you do, you cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping, and with groaning. And some of this may have been the tears of the wives that had been left. A lot of times when people argue that it's okay for them to be in a relationship with someone who has left their spouse or left their family because it feels right, they ignore that it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel good to the kids that are left, or to the spouse that's been left, to parents who've been hurt, or to in-laws and friends that have been hurt. There are a lot of people suffering and in misery when that happens. And to say it feels right to me is a very selfish thing to think, and to completely ignore everybody else in the picture. There's something else, though, that I think factors in here, is that a lot of times people somehow think that when they find themselves tempted by a situation like this, that it is unique. that the love that they feel is very unique and no one has ever felt this way before. The problem with that is we are not all that unique from one another. Book of James chapter 5, verse 17. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. That is, Elijah was someone just like us. Same concerns, needs, feelings. Book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13. There it says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. Now, I want to make an application specifically there to a man or woman who finds themselves in an affair or in adultery, that seeks to argue that, well, they couldn't help themselves, or just the force of the sheer circumstances or the overpowering of their love for the other person just necessitated them leaving a mate and getting into this new relationship. That's not the way God looks at it. When you look at chapter 10 and verse 13 of 1 Corinthians, first of all, it says that your situation is really not that unique. Men and women throughout the ages have been tempted to stray. And you know what? A number of them have not. Not everyone who's been tempted to stray has strayed. And so you just cannot say, well, people don't know what I was going through. People do not know my circumstances. A lot of people have been married, and a lot of people have been married and have been at times in their marriage where they didn't feel a whole lot of love for their partner. And they kind of hit a flat spot in their marriage and was having difficulties in their marriage. And they were tempted, yes, they were tempted by someone who showed them attention. And you know what? They didn't stray. They did not leave that relationship. And so that temptation is a common temptation. It's not an exceptional temptation. It's not some sort of temptation that no one can resist. Not only that, but the promise is that there's always a way out of that there's really no good reason why you should ever stray. There's always a way of escape. There's always a way to avoid committing adultery. There's always a way to avoid that. That is not an impossible task. So we need a little bit of humility here to realize that when things are not going well in our marriage, or when someone other than our spouse shows us a little bit of attention at work or whatever, that we're not unique. That happens to a lot of people. And a lot of people do not fall for that temptation. They just decide to say, no, I'm not going to betray the person I made a commitment to. I'm not going to treat them in a treacherous manner. The reality is that the only unique person is God. The rest of us are a lot alike. We have the same needs, the same desires. We're subject to the same temptations. We're a lot alike. I mean, the very fact that the Bible sounds so current tells us that the temptations and needs of first century people and people that lived in the year 2000 BC, Abraham's time, are just the same as people live in the 20th century AD. We're all pretty much alike. As far as unique, now God's the only unique person out there. I think of the statement in John 1 and verse 18 where Jesus is called the only begotten Son of God. He's the only one of his kind. Or where Isaiah calls God the Holy One of Israel. He's in a class by himself. Or the Most High. Or I am who I am. Or the Lord our righteousness. Those are all kind of titles that clearly point out that the really only unique person out there is God. The rest of us are pretty much the same. Well, I want to go a little bit farther here. First of all, that you need to understand something about the man or woman who has left their mate, especially men. Men are not looking, men who have left their spouses and families are not looking for relationships. They're looking to escape relationship. They're not looking for responsibility. They're looking to escape their responsibilities. They are not looking for 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. That is the responsibility and the hard work and the nitty-gritty of you husbands likewise live with your wives in an understanding way. Living with your wife in an understanding way involves a lot of work. It involves sacrifice, commitment, being responsible. It also involves just a lot of nitty-gritty of daily living, of being faithful and responsible when life maybe is boring, kind of routine or mundane, when life is not easy, when you don't feel like being responsible, when you're being tempted to live with your wife when your wife is not always easy to live with. That's that verse. Men and women who leave their spouses are not looking for that verse. They're not looking for being responsible and living with a mate in an understanding way. And then it says, granting them honor. So just be mindful of that. That's time consuming. That takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And that takes an absolute commitment to fulfill the verse. One writer said it this way: I know sometimes men are flattered. They're flattered that a woman other than their mate may be interested in them. Especially if it's a younger woman, they may be very flattered. But I hope you understand how interchangeable you are with other people. Many times when a man or a woman is flirting with you, it's not because you're special. It's not because you're unique. And it's not necessarily because you're more attractive than anybody else, or gifted or talented or impressive. In the book of Proverbs chapter 7, there is a young man and he's tempted. He's tempted by a woman. And the woman says to him in verse 15, therefore I have come out to meet you, to seek your presence earnestly I have found you. The truth of the matter is that she would have probably said that to a number of men. And here's the catch. She says that to that young man simply because he's available. And that's what one writer said. A lot of times, the reason that you catch their eye is because you just happen to be available. That's all. And I hope that takes a lot of the glamour off an affair or adultery. They didn't choose you because you were so special. You just happened to be the one in the office or whatever that seemed to be available at the time. Well, let's walk a little farther here. Marriage is also a place not to make a political statement, and you might say, Mark, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is just don't go out and have the attitude, I'm going to marry someone who's just different than me, just to kind of show how open-minded I am. In the book of Colossians chapter 3 and verse 19, a lot of people say, well, opposites attract. Well, opposites can also destroy and tear things apart. In Colossians 3:19, we have husbands and wives who are both Christians. So they have more in common than anybody else does. They have the most important things in common. A common faith, a common relationship with God, and eternal spiritual interest. But it says, husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them. Even two Christians who have more in common than anybody else, than any other couple does, still can have fights. There still can be causes of bitterness among them. So don't pretend that you won't have any problems because your love is so special. Even two faithful Christians have disagreements in a marriage, to the point that those disagreements can lead to bitterness. Opposites attract, one writer said, is a sentimental way of describing a potentially devastating mixture of conflicting personalities. Be sure to choose a man or a woman for who they are. For who they are. Not just to make some sort of statement. I want to take a look at something else here. Don't expect God to fix this person you marry. Book of Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14. You might say, Mark, what does that mean? You don't expect God just to fix them. Well, may I word it in another way? Do not demand that God rescue you because you made an unwise choice. Hebrews 5:14 says, solid food is for the mature who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil. Be discerning in your dating years. Be discerning in who you marry. Don't just marry someone and then realize this person has huge moral and spiritual problems or personal problems, and then pray to God, God, deliver me. Remember, God did not fix Solomon's wives. What I mean by that is Solomon unwisely married a number of unbelieving women. And in 1 Kings chapter 11, those unbelieving women did not come believers. And they didn't move closer to God. In fact, they moved Solomon further away from God. 1 Kings 11, verse 4, it came about when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods. God didn't fix Solomon's wives. God did not come in as a butler and just fix everything. God did not come in as a superhero and just fix everything for Solomon. The other example is Nabal. Abigail, who is a godly woman, was married to an ungodly man. And that would be in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And even though Abigail is wise and godly, as you read the text, you find out that no matter what sort of example Abigail had set to Nabal, that had not changed him. 1 Samuel 25, Abigail will say to David, please do not let my Lord pay attention to this worthless man. She's talking about her husband. Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. Abigail says, David, my husband's a fool. Now, Abigail seems to have been an attractive woman and a godly woman and a great example as a wife. But up until the very day he dies, Nabal is just the same man. In verse 36, Abigail informs her husband that she had given some things to David, food that belonged to Nabal and her. And he was having a big feast in his house after the harvest. Nabal's heart was merry within, for he was very drunk. So she did not tell him anything at all until the morning. And it came about in the morning, when the wine had got out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became a stone. About 10 days later, it happened that the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Nabal is a fool and a hard-hearted man and a selfish man right up until the very day of his death. And yet he was married to a very godly woman. God didn't fix Nabal. God did not alter him and just turn him into this wonderful husband. So keep that in mind. Your integrity is not going to make him honorable if he's not. Your conscientiousness is not going to make him responsible if he's a bum. Your prayers are not going to make him into a spiritual dynamo if he's spiritually disinterested. God does answer prayer, but putting God in a position, or putting yourself in a position, that demands that God rescue you is a very unwise thing to do. So, don't marry someone and then demand that God fix them later. Something else. Honor your husband or your wife's desire to pursue God. Don't discourage a husband from preaching or teaching or striving to be a deacon or an elder. Don't discourage him in those areas. You may not want to be a preacher's wife. You may not want to be an elder's wife. But you need to honor his desire to become those things. Now, it's one thing to point out where he may not be qualified right now, some things that he may work on. That's okay. But don't discourage him from doing those things. God reminds us that in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1, a man who desires the office of an elder desires a fine work to do. So God says that is very, very important. Wives need to realize that husbands need to have their own faith rather than just some sort of generic family faith. And part of living out his obedience to the gospel may be preaching, maybe being a deacon or an elder, maybe opening up your home and his home to all sorts of Bible studies. It may be having the neighbors over for a Bible class. Now, you might not be very comfortable with that, but you need to honor his commitment to God. That may be a very necessary part of his spirituality. He may be very good at evangelism. You need to honor that. Or having people over often. Or supporting Christians in various parts of the world. So, honor his pursuit of God. Don't discourage him in that area. I want to talk about something else. That is the importance of friendship in marriage. Runrider noted the determining factor in whether wives feel satisfied with romance and passion in their marriage is 70% the quality of the couple's friendship. For men, it's the exact same percentage. So men and women come from the same planet after all, don't they? Friendship fuels the flames of romance because it offers the best protection against adversarial feelings towards a spouse. Marry someone who is going to be your friend. That is, women, do not marry a man who's not kind. Do not marry a man who dishonors you with his words or his actions, because the romance will go out of the relationship. Don't marry a man because you're kind of intrigued by the fact that he's a bad boy. Bad boys become very boring after a while. It's no fun to be married to somebody who is irresponsible, treats you like dirt, and dishonors you with his language. In the Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "This is my beloved, and this is my friend." The way to keep romance alive in your marriage is to marry someone who is a true friend. That is someone that you believe is your best friend, that has your best interests at heart. So if you marry a friend, you're going to want to talk to them and have them talk to you. And you want to know what they think and feel. And you want to receive encouragement from them. And you want to know that they've got your back covered. You see, friends love to talk and communicate. Friends pay attention when the other friend is talking. Friends protect the friendship. Friends refuse to let anything divide them. In Ephesians 5:31, it says that the man and the woman become one flesh. May I suggest that that's not just physically, but that's emotionally and spiritually as well. May I suggest to you that that suggests a very close friendship. If you marry someone who turns out not to be your friend, rather they are your adversary, and they run you down, and they belittle you, and they do not treat you with respect, and they treat you in a very disparaging way, and they put a lot of other people ahead of you. That is, they put their buddies ahead of you, or they put their mom and dad far ahead of you, or they put their work ahead of you, or their hobby ahead of you. That marriage is not going to survive, or at least that marriage is not going to be very happy. I just find it shocking. That so many people believe that spouses can treat one another in such a horrible way. That the world believes that couples can tear one down verbally, and yet that is not going to affect the romance in the relationship. that husband and wife can call each other all sorts of terrible names and curse and swear at one another, and yet still have this powerful romance in their life. That's a myth. That may happen for a short time in the marriage, but over the long haul, that will destroy a relationship. Now, you either can believe that or you cannot believe that. But I think I've seen too much of real life to not buy into the myth that you can have dishonor in a marriage and romance at the same time. No. Dishonor and romance do not go together. Honor and romance go together. Now, you may think, and I want to talk to both men and women here a little bit, you may think that you are fiercely independent. No woman's gonna tame me or whatever, and I'm gonna still have my own unique personality and not get lost in a marriage and all those sorts of things. Okay, I just want you to know, back to Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived outside of Jesus Christ. And it says in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4, when he was old, his wives turned his heart away. Solomon, in many senses, was a very independent man and a very wise man. And yet he was altered. He was severely altered by the women he married. Deuteronomy 7, another verse, verse 4. The warning here, don't intermarry with the Canaanites. Don't intermarry with the wicked Canaanites. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. I don't care how strong-willed you are. I don't care how fiercely independent you are. I don't care how gifted you are. The person you marry will alter you. Will alter you in some way or another. Marriage is such a close relationship that you cannot enter into the marriage relationship and live with a person in that relationship and remain unaffected. You will either be altered for the better or for the worse. But this idea that no one's going to change me, friend, people have been changing you all your life. Your parents altered you. The culture has altered you. School altered you. Your friendships have altered you. A lot of the things that have happened to you have altered you. Long before you've entered into a marriage, all sorts of human relationships have altered you, whether you recognize that or not. All right. Do not marry a man who does not treat you like a princess. Mark, what do you, and our modern culture just might scoff at that. Well, what do you mean by that, Mark? Well, 1 Corinthians 7:33. It says, the one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, and this is not a bad thing in this verse, how he may please his wife. That's what it means, treat her as a princess. Another verse, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, Ephesians 5:25. Or verse 29, the husband who nourishes and cherishes his wife as Christ nourishes and cherishes the church, or as a man nourishes and cherishes his own body. So a wife is not something to be collected. A wife is not like a career or a house. A wife is not a means to an end. That is, well, I need to marry a woman so I have a clean house. Or I need to marry a woman so I can have children. Or I need to marry a woman so I have a convenient lover. No, that's not what a wife is for. Jesus doesn't view the church that way. Jesus treats the church as his bride. He treats the church perpetually as his bride. Marrying a man who treats you like a princess is marrying a man who always treats you like his bride. Marrying a man who does not take you for granted. If you're dating a man and he starts to take you for granted even during your dating years, you need to move on. You need to marry a man who always treats you with honor. That is, he always prizes you and considers you the most important human relationship in his life, and there's only one thing that he would ever put before you, and that'd be God, the things of God, and that's the way you should want it. I don't want a man loving me more than God. I want a man who puts me second, right after God. That's treating you as a princess. That is, he's always willing to sacrifice for you. He's always willing to lay down his life for you. He constantly nourishes and cherishes you with either encouraging words or kind actions or a wise counsel or his presence or his time. All right. Now I want to talk about a few things as we close. I want to talk about how you could ruin a man, how you could ruin a good man. Number one, expect him to be perfect would be a way to ruin him. Expect him to be God. Put him on a pedestal. No man is perfect. 1 John chapter 1 and verse 8 makes it very clear that we all sin. Christians sin. We all fall short. Just remember that any man that you marry is imperfect. If we say that we have not sinned, or if we say that we have no sin, we're deceiving ourselves and the truth is not in us. Verse 10, if we say that we've not sinned, we make him a liar. Do not expect him to be perfect. He's going to make mistakes. Do not wait on him as if he's helpless. Don't do everything for him. It's okay if he has to do a load of laundry now and then. It's okay if he has to make the bed now and then. It's okay if he has to clean up his bathroom now and then. A man should know how to do such things. It's okay if he has to wash the dishes now and then. It's okay if he has to cook a meal for himself now and then. Do not treat a man as helpless. And please, please, if you're married to a man, do not make excuses for him. Do not make excuses for his anger or his selfishness. You need to encourage him to do better. Do not let him hide behind you. If he simply did not get up in the morning to make it to church, don't lie about it. Don't say, well, he really had to work late last night or whatever it may be, or don't lie for him. He didn't get up. Don't let him ride your coattails spiritually. Insist that he do his own Bible study and his own prayers. That you're not doing his thinking for him. If he's trying to treat you as his mother, refuse to be his mother. I'm not your mother, I'm your wife. So I'm not going to baby you or make excuses for you. I expect you to be the head of this house. I expect you to be the man. I am not going to treat you as a child. Don't reject him if he doesn't measure up to your father. Don't be always comparing your husband to your father. Do not always agree with him. That's a good way to ruin him. If he's wrong, tell him he's wrong. If he's come to the wrong conclusion on a Bible passage, tell him that. Talk to him about that. Do not always agree with him if he's wrong. At the same time, don't constantly criticize him. Don't always run him down. Don't just shoot him down. Don't just take all the air out of his balloon. Don't have the attitude that whatever you can do is better or whatever another man can do is better. Do not criticize him in the front of other men. Don't smother or worship him. Don't order him around. You need to let him be the head of the house. God commands that. Don't make the mistake of not making him accountable. Don't just let him stay out all night. Don't just let him have his own bank account and not know what's going on there. Or just, what happened to the paycheck or what happened to a good portion of the paycheck. Where you been. Hold him accountable. The only reason that some men get away with bad behavior is that women put up with it. If you put up with bad behavior, he will not change. If you put up with bad behavior, he will just keep doing bad behavior. Tell you what, getting married is not going to put an end to bad behavior. If you're dating a man and he's behaving poorly, do not marry him, because marriage is not going to instantly alter him. When the kids come along, do not get preoccupied with the kids and obsess about them and spend all your time with them and make them the center of your life. The kids are important, but they're not more important than your husband. Your kids are not more important than your husband. The marriage comes first. The kids come second. Don't reverse those. Do not cease to grow spiritually and grow and mature with him. Continue to learn and do your own Bible study and grow spiritually. It's a difficult situation to be in a relationship when someone is not maturing at the same rate you are. And there's a big gulf between your maturity and their maturity. Do not expect or demand that he make more money this year than last year. Be grateful for his hard work and the job he has. Do not laugh at him when he's weak or vulnerable or falls on his face. And finally, do not forget to pray for him every day of your life. He needs your prayers. I hope the study's been helpful to you. If you have any other questions, you can give us a call at 503-644-9017. If you'd like to find out more lessons and more of the material that we have put together, there are many lessons on the web, www.beavertonchurchofchrist.net. If you're wanting to know what to do to be saved, you need to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And here I'll give you some scriptures. First of all, believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, John 3:16. You have to repent of your sins. You can't become a Christian and still living a sinful lifestyle, Acts 2:38. You need to confess, be willing to confess publicly that Jesus is the Christ, Acts 8:37. You need to be baptized, immersed, that means covered, immersed in water, for the forgiveness of your sins. Mark 16:16, 1 Peter 3:21, Acts 22:16. Upon that, the Lord adds you to the church that you can find in the Bible, not a human denomination. The Lord adds you to the church that he founded, the church that you can find in your New Testament. When you're baptized, you need to find a local congregation that follows faithfully the teachings of Christ. And you need to work and worship and support that congregation. And you need to live a godly life. You need to be the type of husband or wife that God expects you to be. You need to be the type of parent. You need to be the type of employee or employer, and the type of citizen. And you also need to believe and practice the teachings of Christ. Study your Bible. You need to share the gospel with other people. And in general, you need to follow Christ, walk in his footsteps. If you've looked at that and you said, you know what, I'm prepared to make that commitment and I want to be baptized, well then give us a call. There are no special times to be baptized. We don't save up baptisms. In the Bible, people were baptized at the point where they understood the gospel and were prepared to live by it. Many passages will tell you they were baptized that very hour of the night, or they were baptized immediately. Anytime that you're ready to make a commitment, a lifelong commitment to Jesus Christ, give us a call at 503-644-9017, and we will baptize you. Whether that is midnight, 2 in the morning, 8 o'clock Monday morning, whatever that is, all you have to do is give us a call. Whatever you need, whatever your need may be, I hope you take advantage of the help that we can provide. Thank you.